Let's see next concept, hydrosier, stage of a hydraulic succession. Ecological succession in hydras. Hydrous succession, it is nothing but the succession take place inside the aquatic body. Originate in a water body, usually ponds. Plankton will be a primary community, forest will be a climax community. Include the several stages. First is the phytoplankton stage, then rooted submerged stage, then rooted floating stage, then reed swamp stage, sedge meadow stage, woodland stage, and finally forest stage. First is the phytoplankton stage. There will be a pointer community, green algae, diatom, bacteria that are the organism established first community. Hence that is known as a pointer community. They multiply and grow for sometimes fix the light energy and the nutrient to the soil and the water. That are the first pointer stage, that is known as the phytoplankton community. Then rooted submerged stage, nutrients are added in the soil by the death and the decomposition of a phytoplankton. Soft muddy bottom is a forms, bottom is a rich with a silt, water depth become a shallower, light penetrate become a easy. This promote the growth of a rooted hydrophyte like Hydrilla, Vallisneria, Utricularia. Then rooted floating stage, more reduction in a water depth, increase the width and the bottom of a soil, silt, death and decomposition of a rooted plants and the nutrient rooted floating plants are starts to appear. For example, Nilombo nymphia trapa. The free floating plants can also develop Azolla, Lema, Ulfia, Pistia, Salvinia. That are the third stage, that is the rooted floating stage. Then reed swamp stage. It is also called as the amphibious stage. Water level is very much reduced. Soil and the silt level increases. Soil become more fertile by the death of decaying the plant of first three community. Most of plant it is well rooted, but their shoot is exposed in a year. A well developed rhizome forms a very dense vegetation, for example, typha and sagittaria. Then next stage is a siege meadow stage. Water level further decreases, soil level increases. Plant of a cypressy poaceae is a predominant. They forms a mat-like vegetation over the top of a soil. Rhizome is a well developed and the interconnected, have a high rate of transpiration. Water level is further reduced and soil exposed to air. Nutrient like ammonia sulfide become oxidized to nitrate and the sulfate, and terrestrial soil formation proceed. Woodland stage, soil become a drier and most of the times marshy vegetations replaced by a terrestrial vegetation. Shrubs, herbs is a predominant. Small tree also occurs, huge accumulation of humus occurs. Variety of decomposer in the soil. Fertility of soil is increases. For example, salix, eupotorium and alnus. Then forest stage, it is also known as a climax community. After the death of a woodland community invaded by a tree forms the predominant. Canopy cover the entire area. Light penetrate to the lower canopy and a reduce. Herbs and shrubs are highly reduced. Wooded climber is also predominant. Climate determine the Climate determines the type of forest. For example, Shoria, Curcus, and the Acer. That are the climax community. That is the last stage of a hydrosier succession. Let's see. There are the 8 steps are given. Firstly, newly formed water body. Second, phytoplankton stage. Rooted submerged stage. Rooted floating stage. Reed swamp stage. Siege meadow stage. Woodland stage. And the climax stage, that is a forest stage. Then Ecological succession in a bare rock, that means a zero shear succession. Zero shear is a plant succession which is limited by a water availability. Xerar succession is an ecological community originated extremely dry situation as such as a sand desert, sand dunes, salt desert, rock desert. In figure we can see bare area, then lichen will be developed, then small annuals, then perennials, then grasses, then the shadow tree can be developed. Let's see bare area. The first form of a life is originated such place which do not had a life, such as a island forms the after the volcanic activity, recreating glaciers. Exposed rock, lichen, grasses, aspen, black spruce, white spruce, crustose lichen. Lichen is an important pointer of a primary succession. It is composed of a photosynthetic algae and the fungi like absorbing nutrient from a rock and hold the water together and the break down a rock soil accumulate into particles traps in a crack in a rock. Lichen decomposes the providing the food for a mosses. Crustos lichen, a bare rock consists solid surface or a very large boulders, and there no place for the rooting plant colonize, and the thalli of a crustose lichen can adhere to the surface of a rock and absorb moisture from an atmosphere. Therefore, they colonize the bare area surface of a rock first. These lichen produce acid which corrode the rock. When these lichen die in their thalli, they are decomposed and add the humus. These promote the soil building and the environment become suitable for the growth of a folios and the fructose type of a lichen. They can absorb more water and are able to accumulate more dust particles. Thus, the shallow depression in a rock become filled with the sold and the topsoil layer is increases. Further, there is a autogenic changes favor the growth and establishment of mosses. Then foliose lichen have a leaf-like thalli, while the fruticose lichen are like a small bushes. They are attached to the substratum at a one point. Only therefore they do not cover the soil completely. They can absorb and retain more water and are able to accumulate more dust particles. They die and remains and decompose to humans which mix the soil particle and helps to building substratum and improving the soil moisture content further. These autogenic changes favor the growth and establishment of mosses. As a mosses develops in patches, they catch the soil particle from the air and the help in a increases in a amount of substratum. The changing environment leads to a migration of lichens and helps to invasion of a herbaceous vegetation that can outcomplete the mosses. The spores. The spores of a xerophytic mosses such as a polytrichum, tortula, grimia are brought to a rock where they can succeed lichen. Their rhizoids penetrate soils among the crevices and secrete the acid for the corrode the rock. The body of moss is a rich organic and inorganic compound. With the changing the environment which leads the migration of a lichen and the help to invasion of a herbaceous vegetation that can out the complete mosses. Then herb stage. Herbaceous weed, mostly annual, such as the asters, evening promise, primroses, and the milkweed invade the rock. Their roots penetrate deep down and secrete the acid and enhance the process of a weathering of a leaf, litter, and the death of a herb and add humus to a soil. Herbaceous weedy, mostly annual, such as asters, evening primroses and the milkweed invade the rock and their roots penetrate deep down and the secrete acid and enhance the process of weathering. Xeric condition begins to the change and biennial and perennials. Herbs and the xeric grasses such as Aristida, Festuca and Poa begin to inhibit. These climate conditions favor for the growth of a bacterial and the fungal population, resulting in increasing the decomposition activity. Shrub stage, the herb and the grasses mixture invade by the shrub species such as the rose and the phytocarpus. Early invasion shrubs is slow, but once few bushes have become established, birds invade the area with the help of a dispersed shrub stage. Then next is the climax stage, that is the forest stage. The succession of community of climax community is the forest. Many intermediate trees stages develop prior establishment of a climax community. Let's see that is the flowcharts of a xerosears or the xerac community. Next that is the microbial or the heterotrophy. Microbial or heterotrophy community. Observe the success of a bacteria communities in a different types of milk. Bacteria reproduce quickly. Milk highly nutritious with carbohydrate, protein and lipid. Stages of milk succession. Pseudomonas acrobacterium gram negative rods digest the butter and fat and give to milk to the putrid smell. Lactobacillus gram positive bacteria streptococcus ferment the lactose to 1 lakh 1C acid and the as 1C acid. Acidity of source milks and convert into casein to a crude. Yeast thrive in an acidic condition and the metabolize the acid into a non-acidic compound. Bacillus metabolize the protein into ammonia product and raise to a milk pH. Spoiled milk odor is very noticeable at this stage. Designed to experiment. First experiment related to the different types of milk. Whole scheme. Look the nutritious information, and second experiment investigate the temperature or the amount and the time age of a milk. Use of a scientific method. Hypothesis, null hypothesis. Identify the independent and dependent variable. Identify the control experimental groups. Identify the standardized variation. Make sure your pH, color, order and consistency. More about the bacteria. There are the three forms of bacteria: Spirilla bacteria, spiral shape; Bacillus, rod shape; Coccus, spear shape. Gram stains techniques. Distinguish between the gram bacteria, gram positive and the gram negative. Highly peptidoglycan, sugars and amino acids, stains violet, and gram negative less peptidoglycan and the outer lipopolysaccharide layer. Stain pink. Gram stain procedure 4 steps. Primary stain of bacteria, mordant set stains, then decolorization and the counter stain. That are the 4 steps of staining. Gram positive, gram negative. Development and evolution of a ecosystem. 1 billion years later, there were the prokaryotic life forms which considered to be a ancestor of all living organism. Common characteristic of species: all life of a cellular in a nature are made up of a 50 to 90% of water. Source of a proton HO and the good solvent of biomolecules. Major element like a CHONPS, there are the set of molecules: sugars, amino acid, nucleotide, phospholipid, vitamin and the coenzymes universally found in all living organisms. Presence of a universally type of all membrane structure. Development in a ecosystem or the ecological succession. When the stripe of original vegetation by a fire, flood, or the glaciation and an area of a bare ground does not remains divide to plants and animals, beginning with the plants area rapidly colonizing by the variety of both plants and animal species that subsequently modify one or the more environmental factors in which ecosystem. This modification of environment may turn allows to additional species become established. The development of a community by the action of vegetation on the environment leading to the establishment of a new species term as a succession or a development. Then causes of succession, initial causes, issues and the stabilizing causes. Let's say initial causes, these are the climate as well as the biotic in nature. All these causes produces the bare areas or the destroy the existing population in an area. ECCs, these are the processes as a migration, aggregation, competition, reaction, which causes the successive waves of a population result to changes chiefly edaphic features of a area. Then stabilizing causes. These include factors such as the climate of a area result in stabilizing the community. Then possible succession, aquatic succession. Let's see phytoplankton, that are the same flowchart are given for the aquatic ecosystem. Community evolution, like a responses of community to changing the abiotic condition of community. Evolution envelope progressive changes in a climax community. Because the evolution exceedingly slow, it cannot be observed operation, and the few instances from the fossil record are the sufficiently complete to show the process of inaction. By some 300 million years ago, the reptiles and the evolved that could be feed effectively on a terrestrial invertebrate. An entirely land-based community was theoretically possible in which all herbivores niches were assumed by a invertebrate and the some carnivorous niches vertebrate. However, the paleoecological evidence suggests that the most of the contemporary contemporary carnivorous vertebrate were the unable to yet realize the entirely terrestrial carnivorous niches, so that the great majority of energy flow through a community continue to pass through aquatic routes, the typically food chain to the highest terrestrial vertebrate. Carnivores was a plant, aquatic invertebrate feeding the vertebrate, and the semi-aquatic predator on the terrestrial predator. The principle of ecological succession bears an important relationship between man and nature. The worst, the words strategy of succession is a short terms. The process basically same strategy. It is a long terms evolutionary development. Biospheres namely increase the control or the homeostasis with the physical environment in the sense of achieving maximum protection from a discurrent. Ecological succession may be defined in terms of following three parameters. First, it is a process of a community development that a reasonable direction and therefore the predictable. It a result modification of physical environment by a community. That succession community is controlled even though by the physical environment and determine the pattern of the rate change and the often the sets of a limit how far development can go. Then culminates stabilize the ecosystem which maximum biomass and the symbiotic function between the organism are maintained per unit of available energy flow. Then bioenergetics and ecosystem development. In early stages of ecological succession or an young natures To speak about the rate of primary production, total gross production exceeds the rate of community respiration, food chain and the food web. As the ecosystem develops, subtle changes in the network pattern of food chain may be exceeded. The manner in which a organism link together through food tends to the relative simple to linear and the early stages of succession as a consequence of a low diversity. Furthermore, the heterotrophic utilization of a net production occurs predominantly by way of a grazing food chains, that is a plant herbivore carnivore sequence concept of a climax, culmination stage of plant succession for a given environment. Floods, disturbance, wildfire, windstorms. Characteristics of a climax: the vegetation of a tolerant environment condition. It may be a wide diversity of species, well-drained spatial structure and the complex food chain. The climax ecosystem is balanced. Their equilibrium between the gross primary production and the total respiration, between the energy used from a sunlight and the energy released by a decomposition, between the uptake of a nutrient from the soil and the return to nutrient by a litter for the soils. Individual in a climax stage are replaced by a other of the same kinds. Thus, the species composition is maintained equilibrium. It then index the climate of the area, the life of growth forms the indicate the climate types. Classification of climate. Climatic climax. It is a climax which owes its distinctive characters to a climate factors conjunctive with only such a biotic influence such as the plants and the animals naturally occurring in an area. Edaphic climax. That climax it is determined by the edaphic factor like a soil. The plant community immediately preceding the serial development of an climatic climax. The region around found the condition of a drier than the usual climate of the region. Post climax. A plant community is more exacting than the climatic climax of a given and found to exceptionally favorable site to condition within that region. Then biotic climax or a subclimax, the climax which differ from the climatic climax of a area owing the action of a biotic factors. Catastrophic climax vegetation is a vulnerable due to a catastrophic event such as a wildfire. Then disclimax, when the stable community which is not the climatic edaphic for the given site maintained by a man or his domestic animals is designated as a disclimax, disturbance of a climax or anthropogenic subclimax. What is a biomes? Biomes is a large area which is characterized by the specific types of a climate and the certain types of plants and animal community. Each biomes made up of a individual ecosystem. Let's see, biomes is a large ecosystem where plants and animals, insect, peoples live in a certain type of a climate. Biomes is described by their vegetation. Plants that grow in that area determine the other organism that can live in there. Plants in a particular biomes have a characteristic specialized structure adaptation that allows the plant to survive in that biomes. These adaptation include size, shape, color. For example, plants of tundra tends to a short because they cannot obtain enough water to grow larger. World's major terrestrial biomes. Kinds of biomes: terrestrial and the aquatic. Terrestrial: rainforest, tundra, taiga, desert, temperate deciduous and grassland. In that terrestrial biomes, terrestrial organism, plant as well as animal generally found. In aquatic, there are the marine, fresh, estuarine, condition aquatic animals and plants will be found. That means ocean, coral reefs, estuaries, freshwater, rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, and wetlands. Biomes characteristic of a rainforest. The tropicals and the temperate, most of trees flares at the base. Vegetation is a dense, rich in diversity. Then precipitation and the climate, lush and the wet. Rainfall regularly throughout the year. Tropical rainforest are the warm and the moist, while the temperate rainforest are cool. Biome characteristic of a tundra. Arctic tundra Arctic tundra at the pole, animals adapted to handle winter, to breed and raise the young quickly. Very short and cool summer. The soil is often frozen. Permafrost, permanent, permanent ice, and usually exceed within the meter. Precipitation and the climate. The average annual temperature is only 10 to 20 Farad. That means 12 to the 6 degrees Celsius. But in a minus. Water is unavailable during the most of the year. Annual precipitation is very low, usually less than the 10 inches. Biomes of a taiga. The largest biomes in the world. Winters are cold and summers are the warmth. Lots of conifer grow here. Prone to wildfire, many trees are adapted to this growing thick bark. Precipitation and the climate. The average temperature is below freezing for the 6 months of the year. Total yearly precipitation of the taiga 12 to 33 inches. Although the cold winters have some snowfalls and the most of the precipitation comes during the warm, humid and the summer month. Then desert. Land extremes heat and the extreme dryness, but a sudden of flash floods. Cold nights have a few trees, other vegetation, precipitation, and the climate. Desert usually very dry. Even the wettest deserts get a less than a 10 inches of precipitation of a year. There may be a few periods of rain per year with a lot of time between the rain. Then temperate deciduous has a four season: winter, spring, and falls. Animals and the plants have a special adaptation to cope with yearly seasonal changes. The word deciduous means exactly the leaves on these trees do changes the color in autumn and the fall of in the winter and the grow back again in the spring. Precipitation get the second most amount of rainfall per year. Average temperature of forest about the 50 degree Fahrenheit. Then biomes of a grassland, big open space. There are the not many bushes in the grassland. Trees are found only by rivers and the streams. Grassland seems like an endless ocean of grasses. Grassland soil tends to a deep and the fertile, found on a fertile, found every continent except the Antarctica. Precipitation and the climate. Grassland receive 10 to 30 inches rainfall per year. If they receive more rain, grassland will become a forest. If they receive less rain, it will become a desert. Then marine. Marine region covers about the 3/4 area of Earth's surface, include ocean, coral reef, estuaries. Marine algae supply much old oxygen supply and take a huge amount of atmospheric carbon dioxide. The evaporation of the seawater provides the rainwater for the land. Then characteristics of freshwater. Freshwater defined as having the low salt concentration, usually less than the 1%. Plants and animal in a freshwater region are adjusted that a low salt content and would be not able to survive the areas of a high salt concentration. You have here you have a wide variety of animal life or around a freshwater ecosystem, aquatic birds, amphibians, mammals, and the course of a wide variety of fishes. And the water cycle is very important to a freshwater ecosystem. Kinds of biomes: rainforest, tundra, taiga, grassland, marine ocean, coral reef, estuaries, rivers and streams, lake, ponds and a wetland. Terrestrial and aquatic. My terrestrial biomes is a rainforest. Aquatic, my aquatic biomes is a coral reef. Location Philippines, tropical rainforest in Bohol. Location Asia, Gobi Desert between China and Mongolia. Location Europe, taiga in a central Germany. Location North America, deciduous forest in a Texas hill. Location South America, grassland in Buenos Aires and Argentina. Location Africa, grassland, doldersum wild in America. Location Austria, coral reef, Great Barrier Reef in North Australia. Location Antarctica, tundra in Antarctica Peninsula. Okay, this is about the today's lecture. If you have any doubts related this content, please comment below the section.